The dense fog clung to the earth like a living veil, obscuring the twisting roots and jagged branches that threatened to ensnare any careless traveler. Archer traversed the shadowy forest with the ease of someone who had long made the wilderness his home. His boots, worn and rough, left no trace on the damp, spongy ground. The former soldier's rugged face was marked by a grim determination as he traced the flight path of the strange object that had split the dark sky hours earlier. A faint glow winked at him from ahead, and his grip on his plasma rifle tightened, his eyes narrowing as he crept forward. As he neared, the source of the light revealed itself. An escape pod, its metallic skin shattered like the cracked shell of a colossal, otherworldly egg. "Damn," Archer muttered, the words slipping out barely louder than a breath. He had hoped for salvageable tech, not complications. Yet, as he approached, a shiver ran down his spine when he saw movement within the wreckage. Archer's breath caught in his throat. There, amidst the smoldering debris, lay a woman unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like emerald, casting a jade glow that refracted the pod's flickering emergency lights. A thin, tattered white gown clung to her, accentuating every curve in a way that seemed almost unreal. But it was her face that held him spellbound. Delicate features, brow furrowed in pain, eyes fluttering beneath dark lashes. He cursed under his breath. Every instinct screamed for him to turn back, to abandon the uncharted chaos that was sure to follow. Yet, something in her vulnerable, otherworldly beauty gnawed at the barriers he had so carefully built. "You'd better be worth the trouble," he muttered as he gently lifted her from the wreckage, the unexpected warmth of her body seeping into him. Her skin felt cool to the touch, and a soft, intoxicating scent, something floral but entirely foreign, enveloped him. The trek back to Archer's fortified compound was slow and grueling. His muscles ached under the strain, sweat dripped down his temples, and exhaustion clawed at his mind. He reached the entrance, his fingers tapping in the access code with a practiced urgency, cursing when the door hesitated before sliding open. Inside, Archer laid her down on the spare cot, the dim, harsh glow of his living quarters revealing the extent of her injuries, minor, but enough to keep her unconscious for hours. As he cleaned and dressed the shallow cuts, his eyes constantly flicked back to her face, noting the way her flawless features glowed in the sterile light. He shook his head, muttering, "What have I gotten myself into?" The hours ticked by in uneasy silence, Archer alternating between checking on his guest and pacing like a caged animal. When her eyes finally opened, revealing pools of luminous gold, his breath caught in his chest. Where am I?" Her voice was a silken melody, accented with an unfamiliar cadence. Archer cleared his throat, steadying himself. "Safe for now. I found you in a crashed pod." The woman tried to sit up, wincing. I can't remember. How did I get here?" "Same here," Archer said, the words sliding out dryly. "Do you have a name?" A frown pinched her brow as she concentrated. I think it's Alara." "Yes, Alara." "Well, Alara," Archer said, an edge of dark humor in his voice. "Welcome to the far reaches of the galaxy." The corner of her lips twitched, almost smiling. "Charming," she said, eyes glinting. "Is that how you greet all your guests?" "Only the ones who drop from the sky," Archer retorted, surprised by the grin that broke across his usually stoic face. It had been years since he'd found any reason to banter. "How do you feel?" "Better, I think," she said, testing her limbs gingerly. "Sore, but alive, thanks to you." The sincerity in her voice made a strange tug pull at Archer's chest. "Don't make too much of it," he muttered, eyes averted. "I did what needed to be done." "Of course," she said with a trace of amusement. "Basic decency, right?" He shifted uncomfortably at her gaze and scoffed. "You should rest," he said, gesturing to the cot. "I'll get you some water." Before he could step away, her hand shot out, grasping his wrist. The touch was electric, searing heat coursing through him. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes locked on his. He nodded, a little too sharply, and pulled away, retreating to the kitchen area with a muttered curse. Splashing cold water on his face, he tried to dispel the warmth that Alara's touch had awakened. When he returned with a glass of water, Alara was propped up against the wall, her gown slipping off her shoulder, revealing more of her radiant, emerald skin. He handed her the glass, perhaps more forcefully than intended. "So," she said after taking a long drink, "do you make a habit of rescuing strangers from the middle of nowhere?" Archer snorted, the sound escaping in a rough bark. "Not exactly a regular thing around here. Yet here I am," she said, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "A man alone in the wilderness. There must be a story there. Not one worth telling," he said, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. "What about you? Any memories coming back?" She sighed, eyes drifting down. "Fragments, little flashes, but nothing clear. I'm scared. I don't know who I am or why I'm here." Archer's heart squeezed at her vulnerability, an emotion he had long buried. "You're safe here for now. We'll figure it out." She raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eye. "Are you offering to be my knight in shining armor?" "More like your reluctant caretaker," Archer retorted, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Don't get any ideas." Her laughter rang out, rich and melodic, sending a shiver down his spine. "Wouldn't dream of it," she said, winking. Days passed, and Archer found himself inexplicably drawn to Alara. Her quick wit and easy smile pierced the armor of his gruff exterior, bringing laughter where there had been silence. Yet, with every passing day, a nagging feeling clawed at him. Alara was changing. Her skin seemed to radiate an inner light, her already enchanting scent growing stronger, intoxicating in a way that made his pulse quicken. One evening, as they shared a simple meal, Alara leaned in, her eyes locking with his. "Archer," she whispered, her voice laced with intrigue, "have I done something to upset you?" He choked on his food, the question reverberating through him. "What? No, of course not. You've been distant," she said, tilting her head, golden eyes searching his face. "I thought maybe I was no longer welcome." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's not that. There's just something different about you. Can't you feel it?" A soft smile played on her lips. "I do. I feel alive. More so than I ever have." Her hand brushed against his arm, the heat spreading through him. "Is that such a bad thing?" she asked. Before he could respond, the building trembled with a deafening explosion, shaking the walls and sending a sharp, metallic ring through the air. Archer's eyes met hers in the sudden chaos, and the last thing he saw before the storm of noise and debris consumed them was the hungry, glimmering light in her eyes. The room erupted into chaos as the explosion shattered the fragile piece Archer had managed to carve out for himself. The walls trembled, a deep groan of metal and stone echoing in his ears as debris rained down from the ceiling. Alara's eyes widened in shock, her hands instinctively reaching out for the edge of the cot to steady herself. "Stay down," Archer shouted, lunging toward her. He managed to shield her with his body, just as a jagged piece of metal sliced through the air, embedding itself in the wall mere inches from where she'd been. "Archer!" Alara gasped, her voice barely audible over the deafening noise. "What's happening?" He didn't have the answer. The alarms on his console blared, red lights flashing like the heartbeat of a dying star. The explosion had come from outside, a violent disruption that cut through the dense night like a spear. Archer's heart pounded in sync with the sirens, and he knew instinctively that whatever had come for Alara had finally found its way to him. "Get up, Alara. We need to move." He pulled her to her feet, feeling the warmth of her skin against his own as he steadied her. The glow that had once been subtle now radiated from her, casting a spectral green light across the room. It was beautiful, and it filled him with an unexplainable sense of dread. She looked up at him, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What's going on, Archer? What did you bring me into?" He didn't have time to answer. The blast had done more than shake the compound. It had triggered an automatic security lockdown. The main door, reinforced with a durable alloy, shuddered as something pounded against it from the outside. Archer grabbed his plasma rifle, his fingers trembling as he checked the charge. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice hard, eyes locked on the door. "If anything gets through, we fight. Got it?" Alara nodded, her expression determined despite the terror in her eyes. "I'm not afraid of them," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Archer couldn't help but admire her bravery, but this was no time for bravado. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the unknown press down on him. The pounding on the door grew louder, then suddenly stopped. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the distant hum of the emergency lights. A low, guttural growl resonated from beyond the walls, sending a shiver down Archer's spine. His pulse quickened as the growl transformed into a series of sharp, metallic thuds. Whatever was outside wasn't just searching, it was hunting. "Can you get us out of here?" Alara asked, her voice barely audible. Archer's mind raced. The only exit was the secondary tunnel, a narrow, barely accessible passage that led into the dense woods. He'd used it only once, years ago, when he'd needed to escape the patrols. But it was their only chance. "Come on," he said, grabbing her wrist. "Follow me." He led her to a panel embedded in the wall. With quick, practiced movements, he entered a code, hoping against hope that the system hadn't been compromised by the explosion. The panel hummed, then clicked as the hidden door slid open, revealing a dimly lit, narrow corridor that smelled of damp earth and old machinery. Before they could step through, the door on the opposite side of the room buckled and splintered. A shadow loomed in the jagged hole, tall and sinewy, with eyes that glowed an unearthly red. It stepped forward, its limbs bending in unnatural angles. Archer's breath caught as he took in its grotesque form, a creature that seemed to be half machine, half alien, with slick, chitinous skin and jagged appendages. "Run!" Archer shouted, grabbing Alara and pulling her through the opening. They sprinted down the narrow passage, the sound of metal claws scraping against the walls echoing behind them. Alara's legs were strong, but her breathing came in ragged gasps, her radiant skin pulsing with a strange, throbbing light. Archer couldn't look back. He focused on each step, each heartbeat that thudded in his chest. The tunnel ended at the edge of a steep drop, the jagged rocks below disappearing into a chasm of thick, mist-laden forest. Archer didn't hesitate. He grabbed Alara's arm, pulling her over the edge. They slid down the slick, moss-covered slope, landing in a heap at the bottom. The air was colder here, more suffocating, but the sound of their pursuer had receded. Archer glanced at Alara, who was sprawled next to him, her chest heaving. The glow of her skin was now almost blinding, a deep, pulsing green that illuminated the dark around them. "Archer, what is happening to me?" she whispered, eyes locked on his. He couldn't answer. He was too busy listening to the distant, echoing growl that told him they were not safe. Not yet. Whatever Alara was, whatever force had been unleashed, was only beginning to make itself known. And Archer knew, deep in his bones, that the real danger was only just beginning. The cool, damp air bit at Archer's skin, sending a shiver down his spine. The forest seemed alive, every shadow a whisper and every branch a concealed threat. He pushed himself to his feet, eyes scanning the darkness for movement, ears straining to catch any sound over the pounding of his own heartbeat. Alara sat up slowly, her emerald green skin glowing softly in the gloom. Her breathing was ragged, and her eyes, those otherworldly pools of gold, darted around nervously. Archer could feel the pulse of her light, steady and growing stronger. He fought the urge to reach out to her, to reassure himself that she was still there, still human, whatever that word meant in this hellish situation. "We need to keep moving," Archer said, his voice low, almost a growl. The thundering boom that followed sent a jolt through him, as if the earth itself were trying to shake them loose. The creature was close. Its presence thrummed in the air, an almost tangible menace. "Where do we go?" Alara whispered, looking up at him, eyes wide with the same primal fear he felt. The gentle green light that surrounded her seemed to pulse with every word, as if it shared her dread. Archer hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her hand. "There's a cave not far from here, maybe a mile west. It's hidden, and it's the only place we'll have any chance of holding out until help arrives, or until we figure out how to deal with whatever that thing is." Alara's eyes flickered with a glint of determination. The pulse of her skin quickened, and Archer realized with a tight knot in his chest that she wasn't just scared, she was changing. It was more than the radiant glow. There was a power radiating from her that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He tugged her forward, and they both stumbled over gnarled roots and fallen branches, moving as fast as the uneven ground allowed. The night was eerily silent now, save for the pounding of their feet and the occasional crack of a branch snapping under the strain. The forest around them felt menacingly aware, as if it were watching and waiting, holding its breath. Just when Archer thought they might be safe for a moment, a blood-curdling screech pierced the air. The creature had found them. Its jagged claws scraped against the trunks of nearby trees, and its distorted figure emerged from the shadows, eyes locked onto Alara with a predator's hunger. "Run!" Archer roared, pushing Alara ahead of him. They raced forward, her glow casting flickering shadows as she darted between the trees. The creature lumbered behind them, its limbs twisting in unnatural angles, but it was fast. Too fast. They reached the cave just as the beast's growl rumbled through the forest. Archer turned to face the mouth of the cavern, rifle raised, muscles tense. He could feel the tremor in his fingers as the creature's claws scraped the stone. "Go inside," he said to Alara, voice trembling just enough for her to notice. "Archer," she began, her eyes wide and filled with unspoken questions, but he cut her off with a sharp shake of his head. "Now." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then obeyed, disappearing into the black mouth of the cave. Archer took one last look at the forest before him. He could still see the thing's outline, the glint of its red eyes and the wicked gleam of its razor-like teeth. It roared, a sound that split the night and sent birds scattering from their nests. Archer didn't think, just acted. He pulled the trigger, and a beam of white-hot plasma lit up the darkness, striking the creature's twisted form. It shrieked in pain, but the shot didn't slow it. If anything, it seemed to drive it further into a frenzy. He dove into the cave, sliding through the entrance just as the creature lunged, claws raking across the rocks with a sound that made his teeth rattle. He scrambled to his feet, gasping, the heat of the blast still radiating from the rifle in his hand. The entrance of the cave was now sealed with the sounds of scraping claws and the furious growls of the creature beyond. Alara stood in the far corner, her body bathed in a pulsing green light that now seemed more alive than ever. The glow illuminated her eyes, which were still the same shade of liquid gold, but now held an intensity that made Archer's chest tighten. She reached out, and he felt the warmth radiate from her, a strange, electric hum that spread through the air. "Archer, what's happening to me?" she whispered, her voice tremulous and vulnerable. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on them both. The pulse of her light grew brighter, and Archer suddenly realized with a sick, cold certainty that this wasn't just some rescue gone wrong. This was something deeper, something much more dangerous. "I don't know, Alara, but we're going to figure it out. Together." His voice, though worn and edged with exhaustion, was resolute. But outside, the creature howled again, a sound that sent echoes deep into the earth. It wasn't done yet, and neither were the secrets Alara carried within her. She took a shaky breath, the golden glow in her eyes flickering like a candle caught in the wind. "We have to be ready. Whatever comes next, Archer. I need you to trust me." Archer nodded, eyes locked with hers, as the distant thud of the beast's pursuit seemed to fade into the oppressive silence of the cave. The battle had only just begun, and the real question was whether they could survive what was yet to come. But deep down, Archer knew one thing with a clarity that scared him. Alara was more than she seemed, and whatever she was, they were all at its mercy now. The silence in the cave was suffocating, broken only by the soft thud of Archer's breathing and the harsh rasp of Alara's. The glow of her skin pulsed steadily, illuminating the jagged stone walls that surrounded them. The echo of the creature's roars had faded, but Archer knew it wouldn't be long before it returned. The night felt brittle, poised on the edge of some new, terrible revelation. "Alara, we need to talk," Archer said, his voice rough as gravel. He wiped the sweat from his brow, realizing he hadn't felt this vulnerable in years. The soft hum of her light filled the space between them, and she met his eyes, the golden hue of her irises sharp and unsettling. "What is happening to me, Archer?" Her voice was a fragile thread, and for a moment, Archer was torn between telling her the truth and protecting her from the unknown. I don't know, he admitted, stepping closer. But I have a feeling we're about to find out. The air shifted, warm and charged, and a shiver ran through him. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, a recognition of the strange power she carried. Alara stood up, taking a shaky breath as she stretched out her hand toward the cave's entrance. The glow of her skin flared as she did, the light spreading in radiant waves across the stone. Archer's chest clenched. There was a new tension to her, a presence he couldn't ignore. It was as if the cave itself had become alive, resonating with her power. "Archer," she said, voice breaking. "I can feel it. The creature, its anger, its hunger, it's not just looking for me. It's looking for something else. Something inside me." The realization hit Archer like a punch to the gut. The creature wasn't just hunting her. It was drawn to the very essence of her, to whatever secret she carried. The green glow intensified, a beacon that would be impossible to miss. "Whatever it is," Archer said, gripping his rifle tighter, "we need to make sure it doesn't find you. We need to get out of here and figure out what we're dealing with before it's too late." Before Alara could respond, a low growl, deep and guttural, reverberated through the cavern. Archer spun toward the entrance, pulse racing. The creature was close, close enough that the ground beneath their feet seemed to shudder with its approach. "We don't have time," Alara whispered, the shimmer of her skin brightening in response to the threat. Archer's instincts flared, a mix of fear and a desperate need to protect her. He stepped in front of her, rifle raised, eyes locked on the blackness where the creature lurked. The cave entrance split, and the creature emerged, illuminated by the pulse of Alara's light. It was larger than Archer had anticipated, nearly 7 feet tall, its limbs contorted like a marionette controlled by some unseen hand. Metal plates fused with dark, chitinous skin, creating a grotesque, otherworldly appearance. Its eyes, red and blazing, found Alara and flared with an unholy hunger. Archer squeezed the trigger, sending a beam of plasma into the creature's shoulder. It howled, a sound that curdled blood and split the air, but it didn't falter. If anything, it grew stronger, the darkness around it shifting as if the night itself were in pain. "Alara, run!" Archer shouted, firing again. The creature lunged forward, impossibly fast, and Archer was only just able to twist out of the way. The force of its pass sent him sprawling, pain flaring in his side. His vision blurred as he scrambled to his feet, the rifle still clutched in his trembling hands. "No!" Alara's voice, fierce and defiant, cut through the chaos. The glow of her skin expanded like a wave, filling the cavern with blinding light. Archer's eyes widened as the creature stumbled, its limbs jerking and twitching in response to her power. The light seemed to disrupt its form, sending ripples across its body. "It's you!" Archer shouted, the realization sparking a new kind of hope in him. She wasn't just a victim, she was the key. The creature wasn't hunting her because of who she was, but because of what she was. Alara's eyes met his, filled with a clarity he'd never seen before. The pain was still there, but now was mixed with something else, resolve. She raised her hands, and the glow expanded, enveloping the creature. It shrieked, a sound that tore through the cave and set Archer's teeth on edge. Its limbs flailed, and its eyes, once red, began to dim. "Archer," Alara said, her voice steady as she lowered her hands. "I can control it. I can control what it's after." Archer's heart raced as the creature's movement slowed, then stopped entirely. The tension in the air shifted, and the forest outside seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But the danger wasn't over. They had discovered something new, something terrifying, and Archer knew that whatever came next would test them like never before. "Can you keep this up?" Archer asked, panting as he glanced at Alara. Her light was dimming, but there was no fear in her eyes now. Only a promise. "I can," she said, voice strong and sure. "But I'll need your help. This is just the beginning." Archer nodded, his grip tightening on the rifle. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to hope. Because whatever was coming, they would face it together. And that made all the difference.